need to hear that again.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm reading this. I'm not making this up. The Natrona County Central Committee finds that the appointments made by Chairman McGinley on April 12, 2017 at the Executive Committee meeting were not properly confirmed and are null and void. Only business that could be conducted without a quorum during that Executive Committee meeting will stand. That is the motion. That is what's been seconded, and with that we will move to a presentation of 5 minutes from somebody that supports this motion. We will then have 5 minutes against this motion, followed by our discussion, just as our rules have stated. So with that, who will be presenting in favor of the motion? 5 minutes. Could get a microphone and okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So,
name and
Tom Reeder,
precinct, etc.
84.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'm gonna sit down here because I got a lot of notes to go over. But anyway, so I stand in favor of this motion because, first of all, the chairman really does not have the authority to make a rule or policy change, as stated in our bylaws. That's reserved to the Central Committee. The question put to the Internet parliamentarian at the time was, our newly elected board chair, the chairman, wants to keep appointed officers in place until the new appointments can be approved. The officers are still officers until they are reappointed or new appointees take their place. But they have not been confirmed by the new Executive Committee. The Internet parliamentarian was not provided with copies of our bylaws or state statutes. The parliamentarian was allowed to debate, our parliamentarian during the Executive Committee meeting was allowed to debate and also to voice vote, which is not allowed according to Robert's Rules of Order. The previous appointed officers were allowed to vote. Since the question on their right to be seated that is being challenged, the appointees cannot vote on that motion. For the last 12 years of which I am aware, the appointed officers were approved by the Executive Committee prior to them being seated as members. Please review the past Executive Board minutes. Robert Rules of Order 252, lines 6 through 9, the weight given to presidents increases with the number of times the same or similar rulings have been repeated and with the length of time during which the Assembly has consistently adhered to them. The Executive Committee roster was sent out by the Secretary on 3/29, and it did not include those names of the current appointed officers. A motion was brought forward to bring the question to the Central Committee at the Executive Committee to settle this dispute, but it failed, due to the fact that the previously appointed officers were allowed to vote. I personally contacted the Internet parliamentarian and sent him copies of our bylaws and statutes. His comments were, your board's composition is controlled apparently by 2 sets of rules, your bylaws and Wyoming law. I have no access to your rules. You have already been given a generic answer which would have applied had there been no superior rules in place. The bylaws are very specific that the Executive Committee members of the Natrona County Central Committee are the 13 elected officers. Then, in addition, are the 8 appointed officers who shall be appointed by the county chairman with the approval of the Executive Committee. During the appointment process, the 30 days after the newly elected chairman or re-elected chairman, the officers are just that, only officers maintaining their job duties until they are either reappointed or removed by a newly appointed officer but are not members of the new Executive Committee until the new Executive Board of the newly elected officers have approved them. So every 2 years we have a new Executive Board of the 13 elected members that starts the process all over again, which only makes sense. The bylaws addressing the terms of officers have been tested and followed successfully for many years. The terms of the appointed officers do have a defined term of office. To change this process would require bylaw changes, but the existing process is fair, certainly transparent, and has worked fine for many years. I would ask for your support on this motion with a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I will recognize somebody to speak in opposition to this motion. You have up to 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, allow me to please find the seat here first. So I can see the...
Who's this guy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you don't mind...
Please proceed.
Joe McGinley, Chairman, Natrona County Republican Party. I'd like to first touch on a few points that my colleague here has mentioned. First, the parliamentarian was not appointed at this executive committee meeting. Ryan McConaughey was serving as a member of the executive committee and offered commentary during the discussion. I also want to comment on another point. Over the last 12 years, there have been appointments that have carried over. I was part of it on the executive committee when I was vice chairman. I saw an appointee, if not several, carry over during that time period. Also, just because something happened in the past does not make it correct. Getting into what actually occurred, and I'll give you my background on the situation. When I took over as chairman, I wanted to make sure I offered a fair and balanced approach to all the issues at hand. When I first took over, I was given some false information, or incorrect, I guess not false, but incorrect information on how we transitioned. And by the time I found out that we had to make the appointments within a month period, we only had 2 weeks left. I read the bylaws, and as my colleague mentioned, it does define a 2-year term for the elected individuals, but specifically does not define a term for the appointees. If a term was to be determined, I would expect that to be clearly defined within our bylaws, and that is not the case. If you then refer to the state bylaws under county and county commission or county parties, the powers of the chairman shall have all general powers of administration customarily vested in the office of chairman. Furthermore, if you look on page 6 of the state bylaws, in membership, that for committeemen and committeewomen, they specifically say they'll hold an office of 2 years or until their successors have been properly elected or appointed, implying that there could be a time point beyond 2 years if necessary. With my experience on other boards, there has been carryover of appointees in normal business of most organizations and boards. This is to make sure that there's continuity between one group to the other. In this particular situation, if we do not have a treasurer and we have a new chairman, how are we going to transfer the bank accounts? If we don't carry over the ward coordinator and there's not transition to the next ward coordinator, how are we going to transition the communications? How are we going to keep the business of the party going in a continuous manner? So I looked at it as a role within a business and making sure that we had continuity from one group into the other. I did not intend to cause any conflict. I was not looking to break any rules. I just read the rules as stated and used my experience on prior boards to say this is how we should transition to make sure that we are maintaining proper care from one to the other. I did take the extra step and did confer with our traditional parliamentarian on this rule, again, because I wanted to be fair. And since he was involved in the situation, I asked him to seek independent parliamentary comment. We did that through a professional parliamentarian, and here is the response when we posed this question. It appears that your bylaw contained no term of office for appointed positions. That is true. Appointed positions, that is, positions without a defined or fixed term, serve indefinitely. In our bylaws, the elected positions have defined 2-year terms, but the appointed positions do not. Therefore, by default, this is considered an indefinite term. An election of the party, who does the appointing? That's the question. Does not automatically, so the chairman, the newly elected chairman, does not automatically unappoint those who are previous elected board members and appointees. The old appointees lose office when their successors are appointed by the newly elected appointing party. There is no vacuum unless there is a death, resignation, or the like occurs. There is no time gap when the appointed positions are unfilled for a normal election cycle. So this is the information I used as chairman, and then made a decision at that first meeting to make appointments and allow the previous appointees to carry over and offer transition from one group to the next group. That's really it. I had no ill intentions. I had no reason to exclude individuals. I actually tried to select, and I actually sent out the information prior to the meeting explaining my points and explaining the appointees and why I was making them. I did not try to hide anything. I left it open for discussion. And in fact, I met with some of my colleagues before the meeting and discussed the points and told them exactly what I was going to be deciding that night at the meeting. So with that, I ask that you support my decision as chairman and uphold my appointments made on April 12th to the executive committee. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we are now in open debate. The chair recognizes a member who wishes to speak in support of the motion. You have 1 minute. Why don't we simplify this? If you're in favor of the motion, you're going to be on this side of the room, my right, your left. If you're against the motion, you'll be on that side of the room, my left, your right. And that way we'll just line up the microphone, in favor over here, against over here. We'll keep it a little, hopefully flow a little faster so we aren't passing the microphone around all evening.
That makes it easier for me too.
Please remember, you have 1 minute. We will go for and against. Please state your name, precinct, and also make sure all of your comments come through the chairman, as we do not want to debate between each other in the crowd this evening. So with that, the chair would recognize the first member in support of the motion.
Sherry Lewis, 2-2, Mr. Chair, Central Committee Men and Women. When you elected me as a member at large, I had high hopes that we could unify the NCRP. The chair sent all of us, the elected executive committee, a survey to ascertain our opinions to his questions. I completed it with my recommendations, which included the 6 following suggestions to eliminate, reduce the internal conflict. A, give everyone on the executive committee who have been elected a chance to help you select the people who will be appointed to fill out the executive committee. B, all of us lead by example. C, follow the U.S. Constitution and bylaws and the Wyoming State and Natrona County GOP platforms, resolutions, and bylaws. D, delegate authority and don't try to do it yourself. Then release the people to do what they said they would. E, be open to hear the other person's opinion and take it under consideration. Basically, don't be a bully. F, do unto others what you have others do unto you. I was the ward coordinator during the former chairman.
Time, thank you very much. We'll move on to a speaker from the opposition to the motion.
Mr. Chairman, Mary McGuire, 1-4.
Please proceed. Go ahead.
About 9 years ago, I was appointed as a ward captain. I have remained in that position. I was a carryover. I was never reappointed. And I consider myself a proper voter on that evening at that executive board meeting. I feel that my vote, as were others who were carryovers, I feel that those votes were correct and that we conducted a proper meeting on that night. Thank you.
Thank you. A speaker against, or excuse me, speaker in support.
Hi, Steve Bray, 2-6. Okay, only got 60 seconds here. I would venture to say that the idea of the continuity is inappropriate simply because it sort of invalidates everybody's vote in this room. Okay, it's just like the attorney had mentioned. We voted out Obama, right? Would you want to keep this entire staff? Okay, no. People voted in a new group of people. The issue of the appointments is not in question. It's the giving the appointments standing to allow them to vote for themselves. In voting for themselves, having the majority wind up could vote themselves in perpetuity. That means when you vote, it means nothing if the chairman can unilaterally appoint people from the previous regime and you'll never have a change. So that is basically what it is. And as far as the referring to the parliamentarian, at the executive committee meeting, Mr. McGinley referred to the gentleman as the parliamentarian and
Thank you very much for your time. We will now move to a speaker against.
Mr. Chairman, Jim Anderson, 1-6.
Proceed.
1-9, excuse me. I think we should support Chairman McGinley. We have one of the finest chairmen this party's ever seen. Knowledgeable, fair. He does everything by the book. I'd like to see us support him and not try to reverse all his decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking in support.
Mr. Chairman, Carolyn, 3-5. I want to support Chairman McGinley. I'm not here to stand in opposition to him in any way. However, I think that his decision in how to seat or to designate appointees on his newly formed executive committee was done improperly. No one should have to feel that they are doing something wrong to simply look at the rules and make a statement about things like that, and that's part of our democratic system. The bylaws say the county treasurer, county publicity chairman, finance chairman, ward coordinator, and 4 ward captains shall be appointed by the county chairman and approved by the executive committee. The appointee shall take place within 30 days after the election. If these were not new appointments, even if they're people that came from before, but he's going to reappoint them under his regime, that still says that they need to be appointed and confirmed, and it only makes sense they not be confirmed by themselves. So this is without contention. It's simply a point of order, and I think that we need to get it right. Thank you very much.
Speakers against the motion? Speakers against the motion?
Looks like crickets over there.
Speakers against the motion?
Mr. Speaker, Shea Ward 1-2. I'm a former county chairman from several cycles ago, and it seems like we're in a very undefined area. And I know Joe personally, and I've worked with him very closely, Leadership Wyoming in different areas. I think we can work this out without having to, while we figure out our bylaws or rewrite the bylaws going in the future. I don't think we've ever gotten to this depth of a level in our bylaws. So I would support the chairman's decisions and look forward to working to clarify the bylaws in the process. But we need to move forward with getting ready for the next election cycle.
Thank you. Speaking in support.
Mike Pyatt, elected vice chairman in March with Joe. There's an old adage, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Joe and I met right after the election, shook hands. We talked about the 2 slates that ran. Joe said, I'm opposed to slates. I said, well, you were on one, I was on the other. The reality is, we do have 2 slates. And Joe said to me, I'll probably have to appoint people from both slates. For those of you who haven't seen the whole movie, this movie wouldn't even be running had Joe kept his word. What he told me, he would elect people from both slates. He did not. And many of the people who said they were interested in those positions were ignored. So it's not a matter, we would not even be here tonight had Joe kept his word, and he did not. Thank you.
Moving to speakers against the motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, John Rosales, 210.
Please proceed.
I believe that the situation here, everybody's neglecting to hear about. The parliamentarian said there was no specific rules in the bylaws that made what Chairman McGinley did wrong. There's no specific statement into it. And we got to defer to the parliamentarian. She's the one that says, hey, this is what it is.
Okay, is there any more against? Our lines seem to be a little uneven, so I just want to make sure we have against. Okay, I see an against, so with that, we'll move back to a support.
Bob Ide, 12-2. Just, you guys all got a handout tonight. It might have been the first time you've seen it. But it was another parliamentarian that Tom Reeder mentioned. They keep talking about all of Joe's emails. It's one parliamentarian, this internet parliamentarian. This one was brought to him before that executive committee meeting when there was talk that he was going to make those appointments and let those people vote. This is Kay Allison Cruz, certified parliamentarian. I'm sure the one up front here knows. She wrote this. She had the bylaws and the state bylaws, the county bylaws and the state bylaws. Joe never mentions this one. It's clear in this write-up right here that y'all got a handout tonight, but he won't refer to this one in any of his emails because I don't know why. The other thing is, I'm probably out of time here, but I've got, you know, the first letter that Joe sent out, he called
Thank you very
Ryan
much. That's your time.
Standing parliamentarian.
We will move on to an against.
Laura Johnson, 4-1. I am the ward coordinator. I was the ward coordinator under the previous administration. And one of the things that has never been brought up is that the people who were on the previous administration and not pre-appointed still had their voting rights. And we had proxies for those people who helped vote in the new administration. I happened to be one that was on both sides of the fences, but several of the ward coordinators were new. So the proxies for the people who were leaving had to be taken into consideration when we counted the quorum and when we counted the votes for the new appointees. Thank you, sir.
Back to support.
Kathy Ide, State Committee Woman. The very last final sentence in the Declaration of Independence states, "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." To the signers, their lives were not sacred. To the signers, their fortunes were not sacred. The one very thing that was so important to our signers was their sacred honor. I would like to, ask all of you what you think. Do you believe that those appointment actions on April 12th were those honorable actions? I would dare to say that they were anything but honorable. Those actions went far beyond the violations of our county bylaws. They went beyond they violated Robert's rules. We have plenty of documentation that supports that they were violated.
Thank you for your time. Moving on to
maintaining
against.
power
Thank
worth
you for your time.
sacrificing honor.
Moving to against.
Ryan McConaughey, 2-7. I was not going to get up and speak, but I feel there was some misinformation presented about this other parliamentarian because that has actually been addressed. It was actually addressed the night of the meeting when it came up. She made 3 points in her ruling, which, if reading Robert's rules, are correct in the instances that are talked about, but none of those 3 instances apply to the Natrona County Executive Board. That was brought up at that meeting and it was put out in an email. So what was stated that is in Robert's Rules of Order is correct. It was not applied correctly to our situation. Thank you.
Thank you. As I look at the lines, is there anyone going to speak against? I just need to make sure that we have more against speakers. We're not there yet. Just need to make sure they're in line. Okay, with that, we'll move back to a support.
So I would just like to say that
Name and precinct, please.
Paula Lamb, 1-6.
Thank
The
you.
nomination and approval of appointees to a new board is clearly the sole prerogative of the newly elected officials and not past appointees who are brought forward invalidly. That is the spirit and intent of our bylaws. And I would also say I don't pretend to know what Chair McGinley's intentions are, but I would say that I do know he was presented with the other parliamentarian opinion that is highly credentialed and much more professional than something gotten off the internet. And I would also say at that meeting, that parliamentarian did act as a parliamentarian, was referred to and did vote. And if he had not voted with the other invalid appointees, we would not be here tonight. This issue would have never come up if it had done properly in the first place. With respect to the new officers,
Moving to an against.
Mr. Chairman, Peter Nicolason, member at large, Executive Committee. My first function after being elected in March was to sit in at this Executive Committee meeting. I am in support of the proper functioning of an organization. I'm in support of adherence to the bylaws. Where the bylaws, which we have in this case, do not specifically state the term for these appointees, I support the chair's decision, and I defer to the chair, who is doing his best to support the Natrona County Republican Party. And I encourage you to support this chair's decision. Thank you.
I'm just looking at the lines here. Are there going to be any other against speakers? Are there going to be any other against speakers? Okay, it appears with that then that the debate has been exhausted. In accordance with our rules, debate is closed. The motion is you would have if there was enough against folks to match the support folks. That's really where this lies. So here we go. The motion is that the Natrona County Central Committee finds that the appointments made by Chairman McGinley on the April 12, 2017 Executive Committee meeting were not properly confirmed and are therefore are null and void. Only that business which could be conducted without a quorum during the Executive Committee shall stand. So that is the motion, and with that I am going to recognize the head teller to give all of us voting instructions. The appointments made by Chairman McGinley on April 12, 2017 at the Executive Committee meeting were not properly confirmed and are null and void. Only that business which could be conducted without a quorum during that Executive Committee stands. The results are for 53, against 59. The motion fails.